Hello, and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, April 2nd. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, and Tamara Nassar. Asa Winstanley is off this week. It's day 909 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, Ali discusses the U.S. and Israel's brutal war against Iran that has expanded across the region and why Donald Trump's address on Wednesday night more than likely signals further escalation. Later on in the program, Jon will cover the fifth week of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran and Hezbollah's defense of South Lebanon against Israeli annexation. He'll also break down footage from the axis of resistance across all fronts of the war. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine and Lebanon. Israel continues to shoot, attack, drone strike, and bomb Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, while maintaining a severe blockade on essential food, medicine, medical supplies, fuel, and materials for infrastructure repair. On Tuesday, March 31st, reporter Ibrahim Kanan captured footage of a Palestinian child who was injured in a bombing that targeted a group of Palestinians in the Bayuk area of Khan Yunis. Kanan stated that one man was killed along with his baby and others were injured. The local Wafa news agency reported that another Palestinian was killed and others were injured in a separate attack in Jabalia in northern Gaza, also on Tuesday, and two others were injured by Israeli gunfire east of the Burej refugee camp in central Gaza. Israeli forces once again targeted Palestinian police checkpoints this week. 6 Palestinians, including a young girl and 3 police officers, were killed in 2 separate Israeli strikes on police personnel on March 29th in the Mawasi area west of Khan Yunis. Over the past 3 weeks, Israel has routinely targeted Palestinian police officers in an effort to disrupt social order. Reporter Ibrahim Kanan said that the attack occurred along with artillery shelling and gunfire along the eastern areas of Khan Yunis city in the southern Gaza Strip. 2 brothers were killed in an Israeli airstrike in the Shujaiya neighborhood of eastern Gaza City on March 28th, while they were directly confronting militias supported by Israel in defense of their home and their community. Journalist Ibrahim Bedouan accompanied a massive funeral march after Saad and Fahmi Kadum were killed while foiling an incursion by the Israeli-aligned militias. The 2 brothers engaged the armed group in clashes, inflicting losses, before the Israeli occupation army sent a swarm of quadcopter drones and a warplane, which directly targeted them and killed them. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza, more than 710 Palestinians have been killed and more than 1,900 have been wounded since the so-called ceasefire began in October 2025. The Rafah crossing at the Gaza-Egypt border was partially reopened 2 weeks ago for a very limited number of Palestinians leaving for medical treatment and the return of those who sought treatment abroad during the last 2.5 years of Israel's genocide. This week, a group of small children who had been medically evacuated to Egypt in November 2023, most of them who were premature infants in incubators, were returned to their families. After Israel cut the power to hospitals and then started bombing medical facilities during the first few months of the genocide, 29 babies were transferred from the neonatal intensive care unit at Al-Shifa Hospital to other hospitals in Gaza before being evacuated. 4 of the babies in critical condition of the group died. And notably, of course, Israel prevented the parents from accompanying their fragile newborns. These mothers and fathers had not seen their children since November 2023. Dr. Munir Al-Bursh, the director of the Ministry of Health in Gaza, recalled on social media the story of what the infants were put through. He stated, quote, "Few know the story of the premature infants while we were besieged inside Al-Shifa Medical Complex. When fuel was cut off, incubators fell silent. and the smallest lives began fading before our eyes, one after another. They were unbearable moments, babies struggling to breathe without machines, without warmth, without enough life to hold on to. We called upon the world, save those who remain before it is too late. We carried them through hospital corridors, searching for any chance of survival, in scenes broadcast live and documented by international organizations, yet the world was too late. In the end, those who survived were transferred to Egypt for treatment, carrying the pain of their beginnings and the hope of survival. Today, life returns, he added. In a follow-up post, Dr. Al-Bursh said that doctors and healthcare workers, quote, paid a steep price to never abandon them and stayed with them until the very last moment. And today they have returned alive to their mothers' embraces to declare to the world that the will to live is stronger than the will to kill, and that Gaza, despite the pain, forges glory and inscribes victory by the grace of God. Reporters documented the moments parents and loved ones received their children, now toddlers, from the bus. Adli Abu Taha filmed this video. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Civil Defense and the Ministry of Health in Gaza stated this week that the electricity and fuel crisis due to Israel's ongoing blockade is threatening to shut down health and emergency services if a sufficient amount of fuel is not delivered immediately. On March 31st, the Civil Defense issued an urgent appeal to pressure the Israelis to allow in fuel for critical rescue and repair operations. Journalist Ibrahim Badwan showed the result of the deepening shortage of fuel and spare parts that is threatening hospital generators and is pushing the healthcare system toward collapse amid ongoing power outages. The Civil Defense stated that with the limited amount of fuel that they have received, which they estimate covers only about 15% of their monthly requirements, the humanitarian crisis is becoming exacerbated across Gaza. The rescue workers warned that the Israeli occupation authorities are deliberately employing a drip feed policy regarding the entry of fuel into the Gaza Strip, a tactic that negatively impacts humanitarian intervention efforts and intensifies the suffering of the civilian population. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces shot and killed a 15-year-old child in the Dheisheh refugee camp south of Bethlehem on March 27th. According to Defense for Children International Palestine, Adam Sayed Salah Beit Dahman, 15 years old, was shot in the pelvis by Israeli forces around 9 p.m. at the entrance to Dheisheh. 4 Israeli military vehicles arrived at the camp's entrance 30 minutes prior to the shooting, and young Palestinian men and boys threw stones toward the heavily armored vehicles in response. Soldiers disembarked from their armored vehicles and opened fire from about 200 meters away, striking Adam. After shooting Adam, Israeli forces surrounded him while beating him and shouting at him. Israeli soldiers prevented Palestine Red Crescent Society paramedics from reaching the child for about 30 minutes, Defense for Children International Palestine stated. Israeli forces eventually allowed one paramedic to reach Adam. An ambulance brought him to Beit Jala Governmental Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 10:30 p.m. Adam's mother carried her son's body through the camp during his funeral on March 28th. Reporter Hisham Abu Shakra captured this clip.
يما مغلاك يما يما مغلاك يما
Israeli forces have killed 8 Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank in 2026, according to documentation collected by DCIP. Israeli forces and settlers killed 56 Palestinian children in the West Bank in 2025. Jewish Israeli settlers attacked a group of Palestinians on Tuesday in the town of Taysir in the northern West Bank, injuring at least 3. Eyewitnesses told the Anadolu news agency that the settlers attacked Palestinians on their land on the outskirts of the town, assaulting them with stones and sticks. The Israelis set fire to a tractor and other Palestinian property in the town, they added. After decades of Israel's de facto policy of killing Palestinians by torture, starvation, or denial of medical treatment inside prisons and detention camps, the Israeli parliament codified the policy into law this week, passing a measure that allows the execution of Palestinians by hanging, carried out by prison guards appointed by the Israeli Prison Service, with the identities of the executors kept secret and granted legal immunity. The law enjoys broad support from the Israeli public, notes human rights group B'Tselem. The Palestinian civil rights group Adalah states that the law establishes, quote, clear racial separation, applying it exclusively to the Palestinian population of the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and excluding the Israeli Jewish population. Adalah submitted a petition against the law just half an hour after the Israeli parliament passed it, according to the center's director, Hassan Jabarin. The law is racist, Jabarin told the Anadolu news agency. While many countries apply the death penalty, the statute is the only law in the world that discriminates between defendants based on ethnicity, he added. Israel's national security minister, extremist, settler, and war crimes suspect Itamar Ben-Gvir, a leading proponent of the measure who has been wearing a noose pin on his lapel in support, celebrated the passage of the law by opening up a bottle of champagne and toasting to the prospect of killing more Palestinians with his fellow lawmakers. More than 9,500 Palestinians are held in Israeli prisons, including 350 children and 73 women who are subjected to systematic torture, starvation, and medical neglect, practices that have escalated since the genocide began in October 2023. A general strike was announced across the occupied West Bank in protest of the execution law, as Palestinians in Gaza protested in the streets. Reporter Mohammed Abu Salama captured video of crowds of demonstrators in Gaza holding signs against the law and burning photos of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A spokesperson for the tribes and popular committees in Burej refugee camp in Gaza told the Anadolu news agency that the protest aimed, quote, to send a clear message to the occupation that the prisoners are not alone. Adopting such laws reflects confusion and failure, he said, stressing that tribal leaders declare that, quote, any harm to our prisoners will be met with an unexpected popular and national response. He emphasized that Palestinians stand united behind the prisoners' cause. We'll have much more on Israel's apartheid execution law later on in the show. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, at least 50 people were killed and nearly 200 were wounded between Tuesday and Wednesday alone, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. Since the Israeli attacks escalated on March 2nd, more than 1,300 Lebanese have been killed and nearly 4,000 have been wounded. In the south, Israel killed 3 journalists on March 28th while they were covering the Israeli invasion and attacks. Fatima Fatouni, a reporter for Al Mayadeen, was killed along with her brother, Mohammed, a video journalist, and Ali Shuaib, a longtime correspondent with Al Manar TV. Their vehicle was clearly marked press, and Fatima Fatouni had just ended her live broadcast right before the airstrike killed her. In an attempt to supposedly justify the killing, Israeli forces claimed that Shuaib was a member of Hezbollah's Radwan forces, a special operations arm of the military, echoing a tactic that Israel has used to justify the targeted murders of hundreds of Palestinian journalists in Gaza over the last 2.5 years of genocide. The military claimed that he worked to expose the locations of Israeli army troops operating in southern Lebanon in their invasion and occupation there, and that he engaged in incitement against Israeli troops, reports the publication Truth Out. However, the only evidence the military offered was a photo of 𝐓𝐿, a well-known war reporter who has covered the region for decades in supposed military garb. When a Fox News correspondent asked the Israeli military about the source of the photo, the military admitted that it was fake. Unfortunately, there isn't really a picture of it. It was photoshopped, the Israeli military said in a statement. In a post mourning their colleague Fatima Fatouni, Al-Mayadeen says that it was not the first time that one of their correspondents had been targeted by Israel. Quote, soon after Israel began its war on Lebanon, Al-Mayadeen's correspondent Farah Omar and cameraman Rabih Memari were martyred in an Israeli aggression on November 21, 2023. Al-Mayadeen's Ghassan Najjar and Mohammed Reda were also martyred in another Israeli attack on journalists on October 25, 2024. This is part of Israel's systematic attacks on journalists, Al-Mayadeen added. Quote, in the past 3 years, Israel has killed hundreds of journalists across the region, all in an attempt to prevent the broadcasting of the reality of its crimes. For more on the situation in Lebanon over the past few days, our contributor Rokhaya Chamsadine filed this report for the Electronic Intifada on Wednesday evening.
Last week, Israeli forces have significantly escalated their military offensive against Lebanon, once again striking deep into residential neighborhoods and rural communities. Air raids and attacks from Israeli warships have targeted Beirut's southern suburb, also known as ضاحية, resulting in significant casualties. In southern Lebanon, the intensity of strikes continues unabated. Villages including Khiam, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, Bint Jbein, and Tibnin, among others, have been hit repeatedly by Israeli bombardment. Homes, shops, and community centers have been damaged or completely destroyed, and dozens have been killed or wounded. Israel is also continuing with its pattern of attacking medical personnel, including by way of double-tap strikes. To date, Israel has killed 1,318 people and injured 3,935 people in Lebanon since the 2nd of March. Among those killed are more than 55 first responders. Arguably, the most harrowing loss have been the deaths of journalists Hajj Ali Shaib of Al-Manar and Al-Mayadeen's Fatima Fatouni, along with her brother, photojournalist Mohammed Fatouni, who were killed when their clearly marked press vehicle was struck by at least 4 Israeli missiles while they were covering the situation in South Lebanon near the village of Jizin. In reaction to these sustained assaults, Hezbollah has intensified resistance operations against Israeli military positions, conducting coordinated rocket barrages and precision strikes. Armed resistance units have targeted Israeli armored columns and outposts along the border regions, engaging occupation forces with guided missiles and unmanned aerial strikes designed to disrupt troop concentrations and logistical lines. Hezbollah has also targeted over 120 Israeli tanks and military machinery and have been facing Israeli soldiers from point-blank range. These operations, which have resulted in an unknown number of dead Israeli occupation soldiers, are part of a broader strategy of active defense, resisting any attempt by Israeli forces to advance into southern Lebanon and asserting our people's right to defend Lebanese territory in the face of foreign aggression. Southern villages near the border have seen repeated Israeli announcements of the intention to bomb our communities, but many residents refuse to abandon their homes and land, choosing instead to stand firm despite the bombardment. Hezbollah has made it clear that resistance operations will continue as long as Israeli attacks on Lebanese civilians and sovereign territory persist. Hezbollah's leadership has reiterated that actions taken are in direct response to the occupation's military operations against the people of Lebanon. Each new day in Lebanon brings fresh reports of an attack on a village, a neighborhood, and of families mourning loved ones, but also of resistance and of Hezbollah units engaging in defensive operations along the front lines. The struggle continues with intensity driven by a determination to protect our land, our people, and the right to self-defense against Israeli aggression. The people of Dahi, South Lebanon, and the Be'a Valley are still here, and they continue to resist.
That was Rokhaya Chemseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada from Lebanon on Wednesday. We've published many features in the last week, but we wanted to highlight A Genocide Here, an Amputation There by Ahmed Dremli and Huda 𝐓𝐿𝐿, writing from Gaza, with photography by Omar Ashtawi and Mu'tasim al-Bitar. The reporters profile several Palestinians in this moving feature who are trying to cope with amputations and other injuries after surviving Israeli attacks during the genocide. One of the stories they follow is that of Omar Halawa, 13 years old, who lives with his family in a displacement camp after their home in the Jabalia refugee camp was destroyed in an Israeli airstrike in January 2024. The reporters write, quote, "On October 1st, 2025, Omar and two of his cousins were waiting for a charity water truck near their tent on Gaza City's beach. At around 8 a.m., Israeli shells began to strike in the area of the water queue, 2 shells landing near Omar. Omar's parents, Yasmin and Adnan, heard the explosions from inside their tent, followed by shrapnel hitting nearby. Adnan rushed outside when, moments later, 3 young men ran toward their tent, asking if they were Omar's parents. They told us he was injured in his leg and had been taken to the hospital," Yasmin, 37, told the Electronic Intifada. "I screamed and his father kept slapping his face, unable to believe what he was hearing." Yasmin ran barefoot nearly 3 kilometers toward Al-Shifa Hospital and then to the nearby Patients' Friends Benevolent Society Hospital, but didn't find Omar in either. Doctors at the Patients' Friends Hospital told Yasmin he might have been transferred to the Palestine Red Crescent Society Field Hospital in central Gaza City. "She trekked there while praying he was alive," Yasmin said. "I went in screaming, 'Where is my son? Where is Omar?' A doctor carrying a cardboard box approached her. He told me, 'Your son is in surgery. This is his leg.' Yasmin fainted. After Omar woke from surgery, he felt an absence in the lower half of his body. He told the Electronic Intifada that the first shell had just hit meters from his cousins Hamoud and Muad, pushing them up into the air. In an instant, he heard the whistle of a second shell before he was thrown to the ground and lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I saw my legs covered in blood," Omar said. "I tried to pull myself away and crawl, but I fainted again. I woke up to find myself in the hospital. My right leg was amputated. The other was seriously injured." Although Yasmin tried to hide the appalling news, Omar later learned that his cousins, both of them also 13, were killed. "I wish I had died with them," he said. "I keep thinking about how they are gone." After a week, Omar returned to the tent, where his parents wheel him daily to the Artificial Limbs and Polio Center in eastern Gaza City for physiotherapy. The family has appealed on social media and asked doctors about getting him a prosthetic limb. They were told they are not available in Gaza due to the Israeli restrictions on movement in and out of Gaza. "I wish I could walk again without crutches," Omar said. "I can't sleep at night. I keep thinking about that day and about my life now as an amputee without a prosthetic." Omar is among at least 6,000 amputation cases that require urgent long-term rehabilitation programs, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza, as of December 2025. Of the 6,000, 25% are children, like Omar. Gaza has the largest number of child amputees worldwide, according to UNRWA, the UN agency for Palestine refugees. Those are excerpts from A Genocide Here, an Amputation There by Ahmed Dremli and Huda 𝐓𝐿𝐿, writing from Gaza, with photography by Omar Ashtawi and Mu'tasim al-Bitar on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. Hundreds of runners, some of them barefoot, participated in the first marathon race in Gaza since the start of the genocide in 2023. They ran past enormous mountains of rubble where homes used to be, as well as areas that are slowly returning to life. Reporter Salma Kaddoumi captured this clip of the race. She says, quote, "The first marathon in the Gaza Strip kicked off after a 3-year hiatus with around 500 participants. The race started from the entrance of Al Burej refugee camp and continued to the city of Deir Balah in the central Gaza Strip, where participants covered a distance of 4 kilometers. That's from Salma Kaddoumi in Gaza. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. Thank you for that. That was wonderful to see all those young people taking part in that event after another horrifying week across Palestine, Lebanon, Gaza.
Yeah.
And last week I mentioned that feature by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐜�𝐿 and Ahmed Dreamli and Omar Shtawi, and so I was happy to hear that too. You know, while I was listening to that news about Gaza, Nora, I was seeing something flash up on the news just that happened a short time ago, and I'm going to ask Tamara to put up this tweet from the British Foreign Ministry, and you can see there it says, "Today, the UK convened representatives from more than 40 countries to discuss the Strait of Hormuz and the urgent need to restore freedom of navigation." And I'm just thinking as I read that and watch this from Gaza, how all those countries have supported Israel's illegal maritime blockade of Gaza for 2 decades. They have been silent while Israel murders Palestinian fishers. They have been silent and complicit as Israel raids flotillas and murders activists. And it's a completely, even the International Committee for the Red Cross said that Israel's blockade of Gaza was illegal. So it's just another example of how hypocritical and disgusting they are, and why nothing they say can be taken at face value.
Yeah. I mean, you know, once the best they can do, the best they're willing to do is issue, you know, a statement of concern while they, you know, sign another blank check to Israel's weapons industries and participate in the slaughter of Palestinians and Iranians and Lebanese. I don't know what to say anymore. You know, it's this blockade in Gaza.
Yeah, we do. We know what to say. That's why we're here. We're here to say it.
That's right. Thanks. Yeah. Sometimes I just feel like a broken record, you know?
No,
like
I know.
pointing out the double standards and the hypocrisy. I mean, they don't care that they're being hypocritical or that they have double standards.
No,
they only
they're
care.
completely soulless.
That's it. Well, speaking of soulless, Ali, you did a sacrifice to all of us by watching the American president's address last night that apparently was mandated on all TV stations.
I watched it this morning. No, I'll tell you what I did. To be truthful, I read the transcript.
That's much better.
Because I find that less painful than listening to him. But I did read it very carefully. And I didn't expect to have much to say about it, but I was surprised as I read it that I thought, there are some interesting things here that we need to talk about.
Great. Well, take us through that, and then we're going to come back with Jon's analysis on week 5 of the regional war, and then we have much more to discuss later. So, Ali, go ahead.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder, you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm Ali Abunimah. On April 1st, President Donald Trump gave a much anticipated primetime address to the nation about his and Israel's brutal war against Iran. Many people hoped he was going to announce that he had found a way to end it. I think this tweet from Richard Haass, the former head of the Washington think tank, the Council on Foreign Relations, sums up a lot of the reactions. Haass writes that it was totally mystifying why Trump asked for 20 minutes in prime time on the first night of Passover to deliver a nothing burger of a speech that changed not a thing. Makes no sense. In other words, Haass is saying that the speech didn't say much of anything. Well, it's true that taken line by line, there is little new. These are mostly claims Trump has made before. But taken as a whole, I think it tells a different story. It's not a nothing burger at all. I think it confirms that Trump is trapped in a prison of his own making, and that escalation with catastrophic global consequences remains more likely than a quick end to the war. Let's take a look at a clip, and then I'll talk more about what it reveals politically and strategically, and what it could tell us about what comes next.
In these past 4 weeks, our armed forces have delivered swift, decisive, overwhelming victories on the battlefield. Victories like few people have ever seen before. Tonight, Iran's Navy is gone. Their Air Force is in ruins. Their leaders, most of them, terrorist regime they led, are now dead. Their command and control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is being decimated as we speak. Their ability to launch missiles and drones is dramatically curtailed, and their weapons, factories, and rocket launchers are being blown to pieces. Very few of them left. Never in the history of warfare has an enemy suffered such clear and devastating large-scale losses in a matter of weeks.
Oops. Sorry about that. Yeah, he is hard to listen to, but worth listening to because, on the surface, this is a victory speech, but it's also an effort to justify a war that started off very unpopular and is only getting more unpopular as it drags on. As we just heard in that clip, Trump presents the war as an overwhelming success. Iran's navy was destroyed, its air force is in ruins, its missile capabilities degraded, and its nuclear infrastructure obliterated. He frames this as a rapid, decisive, and unprecedented victory. At one point, he actually says, and I quote, "We've beaten and completely decimated Iran. They are decimated both militarily and economically and every other way." That doesn't leave much room for doubt about who the victor is in this war. Trump also tries to reframe and narrow the objectives. He says it's all about preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, something no credible analysis, including US intelligence, said Iran was trying to do or was close to achieving. If anything, Trump has made Iran's acquisition of nuclear weapons far more likely by murdering its leader, Imam Ali Khamenei, who had issued a religious edict against nuclear weapons. And Trump has also demonstrated beyond any doubt to Iran that negotiations with the United States and indirectly with Israel are completely futile. Iran's leadership at this point would be totally irrational to trust in any deal with the United States. And one thing Iran's leadership has consistently demonstrated is that it is not irrational. It is cautious and predictable, and it has been very clear that while it is willing to exchange messages through intermediaries, it is not negotiating with the United States administration that perfidiously used negotiations as a cover to launch wars of aggression twice in less than a year. In this speech, Trump denies that regime change was the goal, even though it was made very clear by him and by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the start of the aggression that regime change or regime collapse was exactly what they hoped their shock and awe assault would trigger very quickly. It didn't happen. The fundamental tension in Trump's speech, and I'll say a bit more about that afterwards, is Trump's claim that all the war's objectives have been achieved while still insisting on the need for a deal, accompanied, of course, by his threats of major escalation. In typical Trump fashion, he resorts to exaggeration and absolutism. Everything is obliterated, decimated, never seen before. He's imposing a narrative where there's no uncertainty and no space for questioning. He's trying to overwhelm doubt with his bombast. Of course, he resorts to very crude and vulgar moral binaries and disgusting lies. He says Iran is pure evil. The United States, by contrast, is a force for good. It's absolutely grotesque, and it's stuff that you've all heard before, so I'm not going to go into it in any detail. He also tries to evoke fear, presenting Iran as an existential threat, and only Trump's bold decision-making is saving the world from nuclear catastrophe. But this comes off as a more cartoonish and even less believable version of the lies told by President George W. Bush in the run-up to the US-led aggression against Iraq more than 2 decades ago. Trump, as Trump does, places himself at the middle of the story. This war and everything else going on is all about his decisions, his achievements, his orders, his victories. That's the Trump we're used to. But the problem is that by tying the war so closely to himself and his ego, it's going to be much harder to back down. Listen to how he talks about the US soldiers killed in the war, for example.
Twice this past month, I've traveled to Dover Air Force Base, and it's been something. I wanted to be with those heroes as they return to American soil, and I was with them and their families, their parents, their wives, their husbands. We salute them, and now we must honor them by completing the mission for which they gave their lives, and every single one of the people, their loved ones said, "Please, sir, please, finish the job," every one of them.
It's kind of disgusting how Trump immediately turns these families' losses into justification for more violence, invoking what economists call the sunk cost fallacy. That's the idea that you should keep going on with something just because you've already invested time, money, or effort in it, even if it's no longer worth it. What that amounts to is this: we've already sacrificed lives, so we have to keep sacrificing more. That's the political logic that was used to justify continuing the brutal American war of aggression to prevent the liberation and independence of Vietnam. Trump resorting to this logic here is the clear language of escalation. He's telling Americans, get ready for a lot more flag-draped coffins. What's also remarkable about this speech is how full it is of total contradictions. Trump says the war is won, but in the same breath prepares the public for a major new escalation. Trump insists regime change wasn't the goal, while openly claiming to have eliminated and replaced Iran's leadership. Trump claims Iran has been so decimated that it's no longer a threat, yet uses that same threat to justify continuing and escalating the war. Trump says Iran's capabilities are destroyed, but still warns they must be constantly monitored and struck again and again. Trump presents this as a short, decisive war while preparing the conditions that could extend it indefinitely. Trump boasts that the US no longer needs Middle East oil, yet still treats control of the region as strategically essential. Trump claims total dominance while also appealing to other countries to secure critical outcomes, such as opening the Strait of Hormuz. You find these stark contradictions throughout the speech, but let's take a look at one in particular that I found particularly striking.
Thank our allies in the Middle East, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain. They've been great, and we will not let them get hurt or fail in any way, shape, or form. Many Americans have been concerned to see the recent rise in gasoline prices here at home. This short-term increase has been entirely the result of the Iranian regime launching deranged terror attacks against commercial oil tankers in neighboring countries that have nothing to do with the conflict. This is yet more proof that Iran can never be trusted with nuclear weapons. They will use them, and they will use them quickly.
So in that one passage, Trump essentially confirms and acknowledges openly what everybody knows, that all the countries he listed as allies are helping in the war effort actively or passively by providing airspace, bases, or other assets for the aggression against Iran. At the same time, he accuses Iran of launching what he calls deranged terror attacks in countries that have nothing to do with this conflict. So in the same breath, he's thanking allies and they're also saying these countries have nothing to do to the conflict. Obviously, completely untenable and contradictory. And he ties this total nonsense to the imaginary nuclear threat as further justification for the war. So at every stage, there is a glaring gap between Trump's narrative and the reality. Let's look at another clip that I think helps tie it all together.
Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change, but regime change has occurred because of all of their original leaders' death. They're all dead. The new group is less radical and much more reasonable. Yet if during this period of time no deal is made, we have our eyes on key targets. If there is no deal, we are going to hit each and every one of their electric generating plants very hard and probably simultaneously. We have not hit their oil, even though that's the easiest target of all, because it would not give them even a small chance of survival or rebuilding. But we could hit it, and it would be gone, and there's not a thing they could do about it.
We could hit it, and it would be gone, and there's not a thing they could do about it. Well, we can only recoil at his barbaric, violent, criminal language about bombing Iran to the Stone Ages. But beyond that, what is he saying? Of course, he's saying America has won, Iran is decimated, but he's also saying he wants a deal. Well, if Iran is decimated, why does he need a deal? He's also saying there is much more room for escalation. He's boxing himself in further. He's saying that no outcome is acceptable to him except total victory, effectively Iranian surrender. He doesn't define any parameters for a deal. What exactly is he demanding? And if he's already destroyed Iran's nuclear potential, what does he need from them? He claims that's his only objective, and he's achieved it. But if he doesn't get his way, whatever he's demanding, which he's not telling us, he's going to escalate. And crucially, he claims there is nothing Iran can do about it. But as we know very well, and Iran has demonstrated, there is plenty Iran can do. And Iran has been clear. If its key infrastructure is hit, it will destroy the energy infrastructure across the region. Iran has no reason to back down when it has already driven the US out of its bases in the region, significantly degraded US and Israeli air defenses and air power, and it knows negotiation is futile. Iran has clearly planned to fight a war of attrition and can outlast the United States and Israel. The degradation of American military might in the region is a loss for US and Israeli-backed local rulers, that's for sure. But it is a net gain for the people of the region. It is a net gain in the struggle against Zionist colonialism and genocide, which is more dependent than ever on direct American and more generally Western military support. Of course, all of this comes at a terrible price for the people of the region, since the American and Israeli strategy is always to target and punish civilians first and foremost. Iran, which clearly tries to minimize harm to civilians, including apparently Israeli civilians, will take that into account, not just at home, but across the region, especially where Lebanon is concerned. It won't want to prolong things more than necessary as long as civilians are paying the price of American and Israeli vengeance and rage. At the same time, Iran knows that so-called ceasefires on Israeli or American terms do not actually end Israeli killings of civilians. We've seen that only too horrifically in Gaza since October and in Lebanon since November 2024. Trump, by contrast, is on a short and desperate political and economic timeline. It's not a good sign when the president is telling people, as he did in this speech, that this war is short by comparison to the two world wars, Korea and Vietnam. A new Reuters Ipsos poll published a day before Trump's speech found that 66% of respondents believed that the US should end the war quickly, even if that means not achieving the goals set out by the Trump administration, whatever they are. And just 27% wanted the war to continue. If this reflects broader US opinion, it means a significant segment of Trump's own base is now against this war. I didn't hear anything in this speech that would convince anyone to change their mind one way or the other. I maintain that Trump is desperate for a way out, but not at the price of admitting or projecting any kind of failure. He needs the Iranians to help him out of the trap, but he's not prepared to offer them any terms that reflect the reality that the United States and Israel launched a war of aggression, gambling on a quick and decisive victory, and lost. The United States has suffered significant setbacks militarily, economically, and diplomatically since February 28th, and its position is deteriorating with each passing day. But with this speech, Trump tightened the trap he created for himself and bound his fate ever more closely to a victory that will never come. Doing this more than a month into a war that has already gone disastrously wrong does not suggest he's about to change course. We can't predict the future, but the balance of probabilities is that we are still closer to a major escalation with global consequences than we are to any kind of ceasefire.
Thank you for that, Ali. I mean, as we've seen with the Israelis when they state their objectives for the genocide in Gaza, and they continue to say that they've completed all of their military objectives. Hamas is on the back foot. The Palestinians, want a change in leadership that is amenable to the U.S. and Israel. Everything. I mean, these projections are exactly the same ones that Trump is relaying. With this, I mean. Maybe the American public really is that gullible and has such a short attention span and a memory of a goldfish. I mean, I remember just, what was it, 2 weeks ago, week 2 of this war on Iran, where the entire US political elite class and the Israelis were talking about regime change. And that's why we're here to save the Iranian people and the Iranian women, of course, all of that. And now what is it? What are they trotting out there to justify as they're, losing spectacularly? I mean, the US bases in the region are all smoke and ash right now. It's stunning. It's stunning to see this playing out in the way that it is.
Yeah, I don't think the US public is this gullible. They may be powerless. I'm not saying that their opposition can translate into influence on the government. The US is one of the least democratic countries in that sense, where the public has far less impact on what the country's leaders do than in almost any other country. But they do care about things like losing Congress, and that at least is something that's hanging over them. I mean, the polls started off a month ago. People were against this war. That is solidifying. The opposition is consolidating. And as gas prices go up, as prices for everything go up, because everything is transported by road and by diesel in the United States, and those prices are going up, it's only going to get worse. But he cannot stomach facing failure, even though facing it now will be far less costly than facing it in 2 months, 6 months, a year, whenever. Postponing it for another day at enormous cost. I mean, there are countries already running out of jet fuel. There are countries already rationing gasoline, and this is only the beginning. I mean, those effects could be relatively, if the war were to stop tomorrow, those effects could be relatively short term. I mean, I don't know, weeks, maybe even months in some cases. But if all of the energy infrastructure is destroyed, you're talking about years of serious effects. And I don't know, but maybe the silver lining is that the US is driven out of the region and people have a chance to reclaim their sovereignty and independence, something that they have never enjoyed in modern times.
Yeah, I mean, the entire political economy of the region and perhaps the world is forever changed.
I mean, you just have to hope that, like, Jared Kushner's greed with his real estate projects in the United Arab Emirates or Qatar or wherever is going to be some kind of restraint. I mean, some kind of restraint. But I don't know. There's also a real death cult element to this. When you see Trump surrounded by these, fanatical, they are everything that they claim Iran is and isn't. The United States is a wild, crazy theocracy. And you see those people around Trump praying, and they're yearning for Armageddon. They think that this war is the fulfillment of the book of Revelations. And they, they think that they're fighting against the Persia of the Bible and that Israel is the Israel of the Bible. They are the fanatical theocrats with nuclear weapons. They are the ones who are blowing up the world for their crazy beliefs, and of course because they think they can turn a profit while doing it.
That's right. Every accusation, as they say, is a confession. All right. Well, I wanted to ask one thing, but maybe we can save it. The Trump's assertion that he's going to extract enriched uranium from Iran. That he thinks he can land planes and build, enriched uranium mining and transportation involves enormous infrastructure and resources.
That's all crazy talk. I mean, that stuff is all nonsense. It's like the the Gaza Riviera. That's all nonsense. I think the only thing that we can believe in this speech is that he's ready to escalate, and that's likely to happen if Iran doesn't surrender, and there's absolutely no reason to think Iran will surrender.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's bring on Jon Elmer. Hello. Did you watch the speech last night?
I did, and then I didn't, because I can't believe this is the world we live in.
There's only so much you can stomach in a day. Yeah.
Well, what do you think, John? Where do you think this is going?
Yeah, I mean, I think people were thinking that he was going to say the war was over, right? And then he basically just said that the war is going to continue on. And then today, they bombed a bunch of critical infrastructure, health services, factories for medicines and vaccines, like really non-military targets of the highest order.
That's
And
what they
that's
do.
stuff Iran hasn't done at all.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there is, in the June war, they destroyed the Israel's Weizmann Institute, which is a weapons lab that is actually originated with the Israeli Defense Ministry, but it also does other sort of general science, which probably does have military applications like biological weaponry and stuff, but they disguise it as a civilian research facility. But Iran bombed it because it's a military facility. They haven't bombed Israeli universities. I believe they said they could because their universities were bombed, but we haven't seen Iran targeting hospitals, targeting schools, targeting civilian infrastructure. And what they are targeting, for the most part, we're not seeing because of this, because of the censorship, not just in Israel, but across the region. I know you're going to talk about that more now, but in many of these countries, there is severe penalties for posting video of missiles coming down. But, yesterday was one of the most intense days of Iranian missile strikes on Israel since the war began. And we could hear it in Amman. I mean, it was siren after siren and some of the loudest explosions we've seen. And then you get these reports that say, oh, yeah, missile fell in an open area.
Right.
And my joke is that open area is Hebrew for sensitive strategic target.
100%.
Well, you know what? You would see more videos if Iran was targeting civilian infrastructure in Tel Aviv. They could simply bomb Tel Aviv every single day. They're not doing that. They're hitting industrial base. They're hitting bases. If they were firing on Tel Aviv in the way that they were in the first couple of days of True Promise 3, we would be seeing more. The suppression wouldn't be as significant as to cut all that video. But the reason why we don't see it is because it's not the targets. They're not raining down missiles on civilian areas as their primary targets.
And I think they do, they're not in a hurry. That we've said it before, that this is a war of attrition for them. They are not in a hurry. And they can keep this up for a long time while the world's gas tanks go dry.
Yeah, and the interceptors grow dry too.
What did the Fedayeen say in Afghanistan? They have the watches, but we have the time. Yeah. That always comes to mind in times like this. All right. Well, Jon, sorry?
Good guerrilla warfare axiom.
Yeah, it's great. All right. Jon, take it away.
All right, let's do it. All right, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 909 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. It's day 34 of the U.S. and Israeli war with Iran, day 31 of the IDF's attempt to annex South Lebanon, all of which I will be covering on this week's Resistance Report. We'll cover all those fronts and week 5 of the war. Let's get right into it and look at the Strait of Hormuz here, where Trump told everybody yesterday that we have nothing to do with this. So there doesn't appear to be an American plan to run a suicide gauntlet through this area. So for now, anyway, they don't appear to be interested in that. And because of that, the Strait of Hormuz is now essentially a toll booth taking rials, Iranian currency, for their crude, which is undermining the sanctions regime, and just another element of Iran turning the U.S. strategy on its head here. According to the Israelis, they've dropped 16,000 bombs on Iran. The U.S. says 12,000 targets, which means many more than 16,000 bombs. And of course, their targets, like all wars, the ICRC spoke this week and said that 295 health, medical, and emergency centers have been targeted, 600 schools, 17 Red Crescent medical centers, 48 civil defense vehicles, 46 Red Crescent ambulances have been destroyed, and 3 medevac helicopters destroyed. And of course, the Americans are now starting to target key infrastructure, destroying critical bridges, and a vaccine medical science factory just before we were coming on air. But again, this satellite image of the topography of the strait, of the Iranian mainland that we're looking at in the north, high hills, much overwatch, very difficult for any enemy warship to run that gauntlet, and the American military appears to have convinced Trump that that is simply not going to happen. Let's look at the next slide, because we showed this last week as well, but it's a good way to see the size of the strait. Iran's National Security Committee has approved a bill that would impose fees on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The official Fars news agency reported, citing a committee member, the bill, when it becomes law, would impose a toll in rials, which would reverse the currency collapse that the United States imposed upon Iran earlier this year in the lead up to the war. It would ban the passage of U.S. and Israeli vessels through the strait and assert Iran's sovereignty over the strategic waterway, and ban any country that imposes unilateral sanctions against Iran. The Economist had a banger headline this week: how Iran is making a mint out of Donald Trump's war. So the premier capitalist newspaper and oldest, how Iran is making a mint from Donald Trump's war. Iran is richer. They're exporting more oil. They're exporting it at a higher price. They're trading in Iranian currency through the Hormuz toll booth. All of these things are positives for Iran amidst this war and overthrowing the American strategic objectives in this war. Let's take a look at the next map, because this week also the Yemeni armed forces joined the war and proposed the closing of the Bab el-Mandab, which you can see on this map is in the bottom left corner there. That is the choke point off the Yemeni coast running up through the Red Sea, which would effectively cut off the Suez Canal and force all traffic around Africa, which it actually already is because of the insurance rates from the previous Yemeni battle in the Red Sea with the U.S. when the U.S. fled and didn't want any part of that. Shipping has largely moved out and around Africa instead of sailing through this, although you can see the tanker, this is as of last week, the tanker buildup at Yanbu, which is the Saudi port on the Red Sea. And let's take a look at Yahya Sari from the Yemeni Armed Forces announcing this on the weekend. He said that the implementation of what was stated in the previous statement of the Yemeni Armed Forces regarding the direct military intervention in support of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the resistance fronts in Lebanon, Iraq, and Palestine, and in the view of the continued military escalation, the targeting of infrastructure, and the commission of crimes and massacres against our brothers in Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, and Palestine, the Yemeni armed forces have carried out their first military operation with a batch of ballistic missiles which targeted sensitive sites in the Israeli enemy's heartland. This operation coincided with the heroic operations carried out by the brothers, the fighters in Iran and in Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the operation successfully achieved its goals. Our operations will continue until the announced goals are achieved, as stated in the previous statement by the Yemeni armed forces, until the aggression on all resistance fronts ceases. And that first operation on the weekend was multiple Yafa drones, long-range drones, cruise missiles, and a couple of Palestine 2 ballistic missiles, which are 𝐓𝐡𝐞 that the Iranians as well use. Let's take a look at some of the assets that the U.S. has lost. We covered this last week with the air defenses, but Reuters did a nice little graphical picture of what the U.S. has lost. The F-15 Strike Eagles, 3 of those were shot down by Kuwaiti fighter pilots, friendly fire. One of them was clipped by Iranian air defenses, the F-35A that you see there, the Lightning II. It was clipped as well. The first time the F-35 has been clipped in battle. It had to do an emergency landing, and the pilot was wounded by shrapnel in that operation. And we have another near miss this week. We've got audio in on this. This is an F-18 that is strafing the eastern shoreline of Iran, and you're going to hear the fighter jet strafe, and then you're going to see shoulder-fired MISAG anti-aircraft, man-portable anti-aircraft system fired at it. So 5B here. Doesn't get much closer than that. So almost had an FA-18 lost, and you could see that strafing run when it's firing its cannon along the shoreline. That becomes a predictable route. And in guerrilla air defense, when you're setting up air defense ambushes, that's the way that you can make them possible. When you are on a predictive route, if you're running that low-level strafing raid that's happening here along the coastline, the jets are in predictable position, and that allows the integrated air defense systems to set up ambushes in a particular targeted zone rather than the umbrella defense that we are familiar with the Americans and the Israelis. And so far, it's been pretty effective. At least it's shown that it can be effective. I'm not sure we're going to hear it when fighter jets are dropped from the sky. The Americans lying, CENTCOM's lying in this war has been really remarkable, even for somebody who covers military lies for a living. It's been remarkable. Let's take a look at the next one, because we know that they've lost a number of these KC-135 Stratotankers. These are strategic aerial refueling tankers. There was 7 of them before this week, and a couple more were clipped on the runway at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi just the other day. And we know at the bottom there, you can see the Reaper drones. The U.S. has admitted to a couple of dozen Reapers shot down. One Reaper kill was on the tarmac at Muwafaq al-Salti Air Base in Jordan. I think the numbers are higher. The Israelis admit to losing 20 drones so far. So we're talking several dozen at least from the Americans, and from the Iranian side, they put that number significantly higher, up around 100. So we'll see when the accounting all gets made, because we know that these numbers are being covered up. And let's take a look at the next video, because you can see a couple of those interceptions of MQ-9 Reapers that look a lot like the 358 weapon that was being used in Yemen to take down 24 of them. There's a pair of Reapers from this week that you see being hit by the integrated air defense system. So that is the Iranian army as well as the IRGC. We could take a look at the next one. You can see a few $1 billion in radars that have been destroyed. You can see the massive top one for that's part of the THAAD system, and an early warning radar in at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. It was $1 billion, the bottom one that you see there, and the top one's $500,000. They've lost multiple of them. Some reports suggest as many as 10 of these serious advanced warning radars have been knocked out. That just puts holes in the aerial defense system. It doesn't break the system entirely. The U.S. still tracks with satellites a lot of the launches, but they use these stronger radars in the early warning stage to set up the knock-on radars, the smaller radars that have less capacity. If these early warning radars give them a proper location trajectory, then these weaker radars are successfully able to intercept. If they don't get the early warning accurate, then the smaller radars closer to the ground, they're not able to react in time. And I think we're seeing some of that both in the shortness of sirens before the missiles arrive in Israel, and just straight up the number of missiles that are hitting. Israel talks about 95% interception rate, and it's clearly not even close to that. If it is half, I think I would be surprised at even that number, based on the number of missiles that are being launched at Israel and the number of that we are seeing hit. Again, those numbers are unclear. We will track those whenever we can to get those figures more solid. And let's take a look at number 10, because this week's major hit was the U.S. IWACS, the Advanced Early Warning Airborne and Control airplanes, and you can see them there. This is from the Prince Sultan Air Base, and I told you before the war started that the U.S. had concentrated their forces onto 3 key bases, Prince Sultan here in Saudi Arabia, Muwafaq al-Salti in Jordan, and also in Ben Gurion, and presumably on air bases in Israel as well. If you look at the front, if you follow from the top left, follow the runway down to the bottom right, the last ones you see there are the E-3 Sentries, and these are the airborne early warning systems and command. These are very important aircrafts for monitoring the entire battlefield. The U.S. only has 16 of these in total, but they only have 8 that are working at any given moment. And you can see on the runway there, in one airbase, they have 6 of them. Well, this week, let's take a look at one in flight, and this is actually literally. This is it on the airbase at Muwafaq al-Salti. You can see the massive radar system there, and here it is flying in. This is actually footage of the plane that was hit. This is done by airplane spotters in the U.S. That tracked this. Was landing at Tinker Air Base. I think it's in Arizona. And so they tracked this airplane. And if we look on the next slide, this is the same airplane. Okay. This is the launch by the IRGC of the drones targeting Prince Sultan Air Base. I got ahead of myself there a little bit, but you can see here the multi-launch of the Shahed drones, very accurate, very difficult to shoot down, launched here in a clear swarm. We're seeing rail launchers, looks like 6 or 8 deep here, launching a massive barrage targeting Prince Sultan Air Base. They said this is part of the 84th wave, and they said they destroyed anti-missile systems and the penetration of solid and liquid fuel missiles into the they'll call it Al-Kharj base, the Prince Sultan Air Base, the location of fuel and supply fleet and aerial support targeted with a barrage of missiles and drones. So those were the drones. Now let's take a look at the next slide, and you can see how that plane that you just saw flying into its airbase at home, not in very good shape. And you can see directly hit on the radar of the plane. CENTCOM said that planes were, quote unquote, damaged. They were damaged on the runway. And we know the last time they said that, Trump went out and said they're back up in the air. So this is damaged. This is significantly more than damaged. And it's also a direct hit on the radar, which is just shows that they know. And you can see here from a different angle, basically cutting the plane in half. These are really old. These are really old planes. They use old engines. They are more than 50 years old, and they do not have a deep stock of these. Like I said, they have 18 total that they cannibalize for parts for the other 8 to 9 that are operational. In this attack, it's believed that a second one was hit as well, along with several KC-135 Stratotankers. Is this 15? Are we on 15? Yeah. So very valuable asset, multi-billion-dollar assets. Difficult to put a price on the AWACS because they have been maintained to stay in the air for so long, 50 years. So it's long past their price point, but it's more than $1 billion to replace for sure. And so, again, taking a significant toll on U.S. military assets in a way that we have not seen in a war since, presumably since the Second World War. I don't know where you can take out these multi-billion-dollar assets in previous wars, even Vietnam or maybe Korea. But we're talking going back multiple generations before we can find losses like this. And as Trump likes to say, no one's ever seen it before. Okay, let's take a look at the map and targets again. same map as always. Again, we're looking key targets: Bahrain, 5th Fleet, the Naval Command for CENTCOM that you can see there right across the shore from Iran. The UAE is taking the most attacks. UAE, #1 ally with Israel. Qatar's Al Udeid Air Base, that is the CENTCOM's key air base. Muwafaq al-Salti in Jordan that you can see. That's the one dead center in the middle of Jordan on the map there in the upper left corner. We're looking at a map of the region for people listening. And of course, Prince Sultan Air Base, you can see it there just outside of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. Kuwait is being hammered so much that all of the red circles can't fit in Kuwait. There's a number of US bases that were used as hubs during the global war on terror and the war on Iraq that started in the 1990s. Those bases have been hammered and are largely not functioning. Of course, we know that the soldiers have been hid in hotels. And the New York Times had a banger headline the other day that said, placing U.S. troops in Middle Eastern hotels may violate laws of war. So they think that that might be a violation to use human shields intentionally to hide your soldiers who are supposed to be on military bases, but instead are in 5-star hotels in the Gulf. So all that has been consistent. And on our next slide, we're going to show you, I did a mix for you of all of the launches, daytime launches by the IRGC in week 5 in this past week since you last saw me. So let's go to that 17. So a pair of sigils there. There's a Fatah you see going off. That's a Ghadr with a multiple submunition warhead. And there's some more Fatahs being launched. 𝐓𝐴 and again, the IRGC talked this week multiple times about the Lebanese Hezbollah resistance and the Islamic resistance in Iraq and Yemen, carried out more than 120 successful and effective operations in recent hours against the northern and southern regions of the occupied Palestinian territories, and the deployment and hideout headquarters of American commanders in central and northern Iraq, dealing attrition-inducing blows to the exhausted body of the aggressor armies. And you can see in these launches that Iran puts out all the time, they don't see every single launch, but it gives you a sense of what it looks like, about all of it puts lie to everything basically Trump said in his speech. And the Israelis, they say that they've knocked out 95% of these, but every day we see them launched from various locations. We see the fighters there. There's a good shot of an 𝐓𝐴 with a maneuverable re-entry vehicle on those. There's another Fatah. That could be a 𝐓𝐴, solid fuel. Either way, they're both solid fuel. And there's another Ghadr, and they have the multiple warheads. So they're using these missiles. These would be considered old stock missiles. We're still not seeing the Hajj Qassam. We're not seeing very much of the Sigil. And the Iranians have admitted this, that they have not opened all of their stores. Here we see multiple missiles being launched at the same time, which also complicates interception. The IRGC said that the targets for this week were mainly Israel's industrial military base, but also air bases in Ramat Gan, Holon, and Palmakim, which is near Tel Aviv, a major air base and air defense base outside of Tel Aviv. And here we see is an interesting shot. An Israeli photographer, Yonatan Sindel, caught this. This is a 𝐓𝐴 warhead re-entering the atmosphere in terminal flight over Israel. The maneuverable re-entry vehicle uses an electromagnetic fins that grab the dense air at hypersonic speeds during this terminal phase, and this intense friction creates a plasma sheath which is a natural byproduct of the hypersonic flight. And that plasma sheath significantly impacts radar detection by altering the radar cross-section. And again, when you have these radars being knocked out and you don't have the high quality radars, these warheads, the re-entry vehicles, effectively become stealth because of the plasma sheath that absorbs radar and gives it a stealth capability. So this is this is the first time we have seen airborne like this, and you can see the streaks coming off of it. That is the plasma sheath that is being created by the intense speed at which it goes, and the fins then try to slow it down, grab the air, and they make it difficult to intercept. So this is a 𝐄𝐥𝐿 also that was going to hit the ground. Too late for interception if you're photographing it. And let's take a look at more incoming missiles. We've got one more here with the audio in central Israel, number 19. Again, you could see the clear miss by the interceptor that went up there to attempt to intercept them. I think Israel would call this, they call that intercepted. And that particle debris from the interception, that's how they like to frame it, just to tell their people how it's going. Let's take a look at the next one, because the IRGC Navy was told that it was a race this week. There's Sinwar, Ali Larijani, and Nasrallah being put onto the Hadid 110s. And this is a one-way attack drone that was targeting the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, and early warning radars in Saudi Arabia. The Hadid 110 is a jet-powered suicide drone that is essentially a stealth drone. Its delta wing design is good for radar evasion. Its maximum speed reaches 500 kilometers an hour, which is the fastest of the drone category. It almost effectively operates like a cruise missile, weighs 30-kilo warhead, and have been doing extensive damage throughout the Gulf. They're also very accurate. They're controlled with a man in the loop to get those on target. And again, we've seen this from the IRGC throughout the battle, honoring their leaders, honoring what came before them, honoring even the strikes from the day that they launched these missiles. We also see them poking Americans. They put out one barrage that was dedicated to the American citizens that were murdered on the streets by ICE agents. So they have a much more aware, politically aware of the United States, clearly, than the United States is of them. If the United States had that awareness, I don't think they would have started this war in this way that is not going to end up the way that they intended to. Number 21, these are Artesh drones. These are drones launched by the Iranian army. These are Arash-2 drones. And again, these are kind of split between a cruise missile and a drone. They said that the army said we targeted the deployment. These are long-range strike drones. These were designed to target Israel. So they said that we targeted the deployment locations of the AWACS aircraft, refueling tankers, and U.S. bases in the region. We have since this morning targeted the deployment location of U.S. AWACS and refueling aircraft stationed at Ben Gurion Airport, the radar site for detecting the intercepted missiles and combat drones, and the electronic warfare sites countering and combating drones in the UAE was hit. These Arash-2 drones have 2,000-kilometer range and were built specifically for enemy air defenses when they were launched. Brigadier General Haidari, the commander of the Iranian Army Ground Forces, described the Arash-2 as a specialized weapon designed to perform precision strikes and suppress enemy air defenses. So these are for long-range strikes to target Israel. And the Iranian army is taking part in this operation. They want everyone to know that. They're firing these operations off every day. They're also calling them waves. So the army has waves, the IRGC has waves, and also the street has waves. Last night was the 33rd night in a row of people out in the streets in all over Iran, in different cities, protesting, showing solidarity, even though Trump said that it's too dangerous to go outside to take back your country, when he said that they could take back their country, which clearly they're in the street for the opposite reason, and they're marking each of those nightly demonstrations. You've probably seen footage from them. There's a lot of interviews of Vox Pop, people on the street interviews from those demonstrations that show a wide cross-section of Iranian society, not simply regime supporters, but all across the society. And that's one thing that this war has done. As any war does, it unifies the country that is being targeted. Let's take a look at the other fronts. Iraq here, this is a little stitch of a few Iraqi operations. The Iraqi resistance, we're looking at fighters here in a tunnel in their desert camo, using a tunnel-borne base for their operations, carrying out the parts of the drones that are being fired, targeting largely U.S. bases in Iraq, but also in Jordan. We've seen them target U.S. base in Saudi, in Syria as well, Jordan and Kuwait. So they're also targeting all of these. That was the date of the operation. And then you can see here, these are Shahed 101 drones that are being launched in barrages. And again, I could show you, they put out 3 of these a day. So I could show you 21 of these every week. They look pretty similar. I choose the ones that are the most clear. There's a lot of nighttime launches, but you can see them operating them. You see them there. They have a Hadid 110 as well that they just launched there. So the resistance axis is also sharing weaponry across the fronts, which we've known as well. We see that with Hezbollah, who I will be covering in a moment here. But again, these operations have basically emptied the bases of U.S. troops in Kuwait, in Iraqi Kurdistan, in Saudi Arabia. The attacks on Jordan, that airbase is still fully functioning from all that we know, but the attacks on Kuwait are certainly taking a toll on Kuwait. There's no question about that. So the total number of operations the Iraqi resistance has executed, 870 since this war started. So a remarkable level, tempo of operations, multiple dozens of these operations, individual operations. So they might launch 10 drones. That counts as one operation of the 870. But we've had them on the show every week because they're a critical pillar of this war as well. Now, let's move on to Hezbollah and in South Lebanon. I think I want to start with a map here because we talked about the topography a few times on this program. This map from Reuters shows it pretty well. You can see the Litani River running there. That is the area that Israel is attempting to ethnically cleanse and destroy. They're calling it the Beit Hanun model. But you can see the way that each of the ridges in that map on the bottom left, those lines are where the Israelis are pushing forward from. They're going along the coast. They're going up in the center around Bint Jbeil, and then up along the Galilee Panhandle into the Marij Ayun, and to the east of that is Hiam, where they're attempting to take the high ground. And you can see that high ground clearly on the map. And this has always been Lebanon's advantage. You know, Sun Tzu said, don't fight uphill. And so this was always Israel's problem. Their attempt, this is a Zionist dream that goes back to the founding of their project in the Middle East. They wanted the Litani River as the natural border of their northern border, which would give them overwatch over Lebanon and allow and sort of curtail some of that advantage that the landscape holds for Lebanon. And Hezbollah has been repelling that. They've carried out more than 1,300 operations in defense of this invasion. And if we look at the next slide, you can see what it actually looks like. Here's a fighter up in the Marij Ayun area, and he's holding his fist out that says, "They depart, we remain, the land will remain ours. But if you look, he's holding a Hezbollah flag marking a position. This is from the 25th of March. But if you look over the landscape, we're showing you a photograph that looks over the mountainous landscape of South Lebanon, which makes that defines the fight in South Lebanon. It's an entirely different battle space than in Gaza, where it's urban warfare. And so we're going to see that while we break down these operations this week from Hezbollah, that the distance and the topography plays a critical role in the battle in South Lebanon. So let's take a look at number 24. These are the points of advance for the Israelis. Those 5, we're looking at a map from the Litani River down. This is about 10% of Lebanon, but it's about 600,000 people who are slated for ethnic cleansing and destruction, according to the Israeli plan. And you can see these are the 5 positions that Israel kept after the ceasefire or during the ceasefire. They took these positions inside Lebanon. They're on high ground over to the western coast. You see one there. They're advancing up that coast to Nakura. And then in the middle areas, you can see they're pushing into the center, which will meet up at the battle around Bint Jbeil that you see. That's the 3rd one. And then there's 2 more bases along the spine of the Galilee Panhandle. That takes you up into Marajayun. And those are the main axes of this battle. The Israelis are pushing to the Litani River, and the easiest way to get to the Litani River is from the tip of the Galilee Panhandle, which is the furthest most north area of Israel. And you can see that on the right side of the map, how much Israel's border comes up in that area. And they're using that to say that they have reached the Litani River, right? This is classic Israel battle psyops. They go the shortest distance to the area to touch the Litani River, and then they say, we have control to the Litani River. But look at that map. The entire south is still in a battle. And in actuality, the Israelis are only at the 3rd ridge. The first ridge was the ceasefire ridge. They could move forward to the 2nd ridge right away without any without any resistance, because these are positions that they have held now for almost a year. And then they're going up to the next ridge, which would be the 3rd ridge line. And that's the type of battle that you're seeing. We have 5 Israeli military divisions that are fighting spread out across South Lebanon. And that would be 100,000 troops. But they're not saying how full complement each division is. And we know from the fighting in Gaza that the reservists are not showing back up for battle for their recalls at anything like the number at the beginning of the Gaza war. So I'm going to suggest to you that those are not full divisions. We will see as the battle unfolds. But Israel wants that psyop to believe that there's 100,000 troops coming. But at the same time, you also have the chief of staff of the Israeli military saying that we're about to collapse. We don't have enough troops. He's been saying that for a long time. So it seems to be a bit of a race here in Lebanon before the end of the Iran war, that Israel can get as much to steal as much land as they can. And in a world without international law, they believe they can hold it. Hezbollah believes this is an existential battle, and they're fighting it in that way. If we look at 25, you can see this is the battle map according to Hezbollah, and you can see they match pretty much match up with the previous map of what I described. The Israelis are coming up the coast there on the western coast. They're coming up through the Bint Jbeil axis. Then you can see them up in the top there in Marajayun at the top of the Galilee Panhandle. All of those places are being hit. And then you can see the drone operations are indicated here because the battle, the rockets, the drones, the artillery, half of it is inside Lebanon, half of it is inside northern Israel. They're attacking Israeli military positions that are on the border, preparing to invade Lebanon. And so that's how those numbers split up. This is yesterday's battle breakdown when there was 60 some operations. We've seen multiple, we saw back-to-back days of almost 100 operations each of the days. So we're seeing a significant military tempo that we have never seen from Hezbollah before. So they are truly fighting in an existential war, as they said. And as I said earlier, 600,000 people live in these villages that Israel is promising to do to them what they did to Beit Hanun. And we know from the previous war with Hezbollah that they've already started. A lot of these border villages have already been completely destroyed, and they were destroyed during the ceasefire. Actively, Israel was doing the same thing in Gaza as they were doing in Lebanon, destroying on the other side of the ceasefire line. So it's a significant battle that we have in store in Lebanon ahead. If we look at the next map, you can see this is the Beit Hanun doctrine. This is from Reuters. This is just a serious undercount, but this is what we have confirmed as of last week of the number of power stations, hospitals, water infrastructure, all being targeted. Critical hospitals in Sur, in Tyre, which is the major city in the south, knocking out that hospital. Half a dozen other hospitals, 2 in Bint Jbeil, as well, have been targeted. So this is the Israeli way of war. You destroy the hospitals, you destroy the schools, because you can't defeat the fighters. But like I said before, Chief of Staff Iyal Zamir said that the IDF is going to collapse inward. I'm raising 10 flags, he said during a meeting with the Israeli Security Council. He said the reserves will not hold up for a long battle. So he is raising what he said was 10 red flags about how the Israeli military at the moment is unable to fight this battle that we haven't thought that they have been able to fight for more than a generation in Lebanon. Let's take a look at 27, because all of these operations are underpinned by artillery, drone, and rocket fire. So here you see fighters launching Iranian Grad rockets, Iranian-made Grad rockets from these launchers. And we can see these launchers deeply buried in the same mountains that I showed you, taking advantage of the same topography to fire them from deeper inside Lebanon, which makes it safer for the fighters who are launching. And Israel commented this week, the IDF commented this week, that many of the rockets were being fired and strategic missiles that they have as well were being fired from north of the Litani, meaning that Israel's not going to be able to get at them even in their dream scenario in South Lebanon. And that's true of Hezbollah's capacity all along. There's a lot of talk about the south and that Hezbollah is in the south. Hezbollah is all through Lebanon. They have divisions that are beyond the Litani River. They have multiple divisions below the Litani River, but they have multiple above it as well. They have long distance capabilities that continue to strike. Here we're seeing extended range Chinese heavy artillery, 122 millimeter heavy artillery, and you can see the bottom fins there. That's extended range. It's a rocket-assisted artillery round that can go a longer distance than standard artillery, and you can use the topography that we're seeing here both to hide the fighters, but also to have the advantage of the trajectory of the launch of the artillery. So we're seeing something like 40 artillery, rocket, and drone operations, separate operations. Again, this is a single operation where you're going to watch 8 to 12 rockets launch. These are counted as a single operation in these terms. And on 2 days ago's Hezbollah had 36 rocket operations. They've fired more than 4,000 rockets already, which is more than the June 2006 war. It's more than Qassam fired on the first day of the Battle of Al-Aqsa flood. So significant developments from the rocket units of Hezbollah, which the Israelis said they knocked out last war, but now we're seeing them in thousands and quickly approaching 10,000 deployed. So they clearly were not destroyed, and their stocks are significantly higher than that. Going into the war, they were understood to be well over 100,000. So there's still a lot of war materiel left with Hezbollah, and that was always the case. Hezbollah was not defeated. The ceasefire came at a time when Hezbollah repelled the invasion of South Lebanon. Let's take a look at number 28, because you can see the drone swarms here. Again, these are Hezbollah build. They're targeting an air defense base here in Haifa. They show us the map conveniently. These are Hezbollah-built Sayed 107 drones. And these are the drones that they fly, they have an electrical engine, a lower radar cross section, no heat. They don't generate the same heat as the piston engines. And they make it through Israeli air defenses. This is the weapon that was used to target the Golani base during the last war, when that left something like 70 casualties, including almost 10 killed, when these drones were landed on the Golani base just north of Tel Aviv. People may recall we broke that down on this program quite some time ago. The missile expert at the International Institute for Strategic Studies notes that this electrically powered variant, this is the result of a system with a very low signature and should be harder to detect than the Shahed 101 or 136. The trade-off is limited range, but as we watch from here, limited range isn't an issue. When you're up on a mountaintop, you have a huge asset in your favor here. And there you see it's rocket assisted, and then it takes off with an electrical engine rather than the lawnmower engine that people are familiar with for the Shahed drones. And again, we're seeing a team here launching these, but a single launcher, a single rail can launch all of these separate drones that we're seeing. So they don't require significant manpower. It's dangerous to launch them, but they're so covered in the bush that they've been able to carry these operations out consistently. Let's take a look at 29, because we have here a fatal anti-tank operation, a Kornet. You can see there, the Kornet up on the hill firing down on a Merkava tank of the IDF. It is going to clip it here. You see it, direct hit. Interestingly, the Israelis believe they intercepted this and that they were fired on twice, but we can clearly see by watching the video, which they obviously didn't watch, that they were hit by a single shot. You can see the tank limping away there in the smoke, and as it turns to go down the hill, you'll see the flames out the back, because it was targeted in the rear cabin and also the two storage containers that come out by the back door are ammo storage. So that's ammo storage that goes up in flames. One of the tank crew was killed. 4 were seriously wounded on this, including 2 officers in this operation that happened in just south of Bint Jbeil. Of course, Bint Jbeil is famous for its battle in the 2006 war. Let's take a look at number 30, another anti-tank guided missile strike here that we're seeing. This is a multi-hour battle that we're looking at. It was a several hours battle on Saturday with the 146th Division. There we're seeing the burning tank that was hit by anti-tank fire, and you're going to see how close the fighters are in this particular battle space, because you're going to see Israeli soldiers here. And we have seen in the reports a number of face-to-face battles, close quarters battles, where in these villages, the battles have happened at close quarters. And this is the one we're seeing here that lasted for many hours. You're going to see coming up here a group of Israeli soldiers. There you see them there within camera shot of the Hezbollah fighters, and seemingly separated from their armored vehicle. There's another one that you see up top there. There has been a number of soldiers killed in these face-to-face battles. One word salad from the IDF the other day said that 4 soldiers were killed and 2 others were wounded in a clash with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon yesterday. The military announces all served in the Nahal Brigade's reconnaissance unit. In addition, another soldier was seriously wounded and a reservist was moderately hurt in the incident. The soldiers exchanged fire with Hezbollah operatives from close range, hitting several of them, the military finds. While evacuating wounded soldiers from the gun battle, Hezbollah operatives fired anti-tank missiles at the troops, which did not cause any further injuries. So it sounds like the soldiers, the Hezbollah fighters killed those soldiers at point blank range, and the Israeli military is trying to say, yeah, they killed them all, and they killed them all at point blank range, but it sounds like they got the Israelis fired off at least a couple of rounds before they died, which is just surprising military propaganda to throw that in there when your unit gets wiped out and you say that you were able to fire back. Maybe they weren't even conclusive about it. Let's take a look at this next one. This is an Almas top attack anti-tank guided missile strike. You're familiar with this. We ride on the missile for these ones. You can see it locked in on a tank there. This is again in the Bint Jbeil area. They're south of Bint Jbeil. They're not in Bint Jbeil. They're south of it. They'll expect a major battle in Bint Jbeil. Again, aiming here. Looks like they're aiming at the cannon. May make sense. They're also maybe trying to stick it in the turret gap under the cannon, but the cannon is a reasonable place to target from that angle. And the top attack here, you can clearly see it's not intercepted by the Israelis in large measure because of the angle that it comes down on. And an IDF soldier was killed and 4 were wounded in their tank by an anti-tank missile strike this week. Another one, a separate one, where they suffered serious burns. The Israeli military said yesterday that 10 soldiers have been killed and 309 have been wounded, including 25 seriously wounded. And we know what seriously wounded means for the Israelis. It means very, very wounded. Usually means no arms, no legs, from what we've seen in the Gaza front. So they're taking a toll on Israeli fighters here in the south. Number 32, we see the birth of this tactic. We saw this in the previous round. We didn't see them use it against tanks. We saw them use it against bulldozers, lesser armored vehicles, but this is an FPV, first-person view. It's driven from a video screen, and you're seeing them here hone in on a troop carrier here that they're going to come in and come down on with the missile. I believe what they're using a Yasin 105 warhead. They're using the tandem charged PG-7VR, and it's on the actual drone. Although with Qassam, we have seen them use that same style, but they had a drop system that dropped it. With these FPV drones, we seem to be seeing them using speed as their asset, which is necessary because of the counter fire on it. But that's how these drones are being used. So they're essentially, the drone is carrying the RPG round that you saw fired in Gaza at tanks, and this is the first time we have seen that from Hezbollah. Look at number 33. We can see it again here, and this one seems to have a fiber optic connection, because you can see it go down below the ground. So what it's doing here, it's identifying new positions. So it's actually doing reconnaissance here, and it's pointing out newly established Israeli military positions here. So it's doing a reconnaissance function for them, gaining information about where the newly set up positions are to take back to the artillery teams. And now you can see when it's done that recon, see it's below the ground level, which must indicate that it's an FPV link to still be getting this clear footage. But they're showing it here. After his recon mission, he's going to go and hit a tank here and aim right at the back door he maybe is a bit higher there, so he goes and hits in the turret ring there. I think we haven't seen Hezbollah's targeting schemes. We saw Qassam release to all their fighters where they're trying to hit on armored vehicles. And the back door is one of the places that they're trying to hit, the cabin door, also beside the ammo storage. So let's take a look at 34 because we have a couple more of these to show. Again, you can sort of see the difference between the no fiber optic or not. This is going to come in on a NOMR. This is in the Marajayun front. There you can see the troop carriers all piled up side by side, and a direct hit on that one. That was one of 95 operations on that day. That was from Wednesday. So significant. 35 is another one. This one heading towards the coast. You can see the Israelis have established, again, using human shields, parking their tanks in civilian neighborhoods here, using houses as cover. But these FPV drones, when you're driving with a video screen, you can navigate your way through the civilian areas. And there's another NOMR troop carrier that's going to be hit from the 143rd Division, which is fighting on the western coast, Nakura area. Again, that's a direct hit. We could take a look at the next one, 36. This is a cross-section of all these operations. So this is a troop position, also south of Bint Jbeil. And you can see the house is being used as an Israeli military position. And Hezbollah has fired anti-tank missiles at these positions a number of times. Earlier this month in the town of Meis al-Jabal, Hezbollah fighters fired more than 10 anti-tank guided missile strikes at a single IDF position. I showed you that in the first week of the war. On one of their high grounds, they were hit. Multiple soldiers were killed, and more than a dozen others were injured in these type of attacks. This next one is going to take a little bit of explanation because it is a night operation, number 37. And you can see the the red circles here that we're looking at. We're looking at night with thermal imaging, and the red dots there are showing where Israeli tanks are moving in a column into Kantara in the Marajayun area. Now we're seeing rocket fire. So they see the convoy of tanks. Now they're firing in front of the convoy of tanks to slow its progress, to make their targets stop. And you can see here, we're watching the village. Again, you can see the tiers of the mountains that they're fighting in. You can see the benefit that the high ground has here. So all around, the convoy of tanks is now being hit here with rocket salvos. And then you're going to see this one be hit with an anti-tank guided missile strike. There you see it be hit there. The fire breaks out on that particular vehicle. There were 8 Merkava tanks that were hit as part of this operation that we're watching. One of the ones that was hit now. There you're seeing another one up on the hilltop there. The fire breaks out on the vehicles. You can see them burning with the thermal imaging. There you see a close-up of it burning behind a house. Again, we're looking at night. This is an overnight operation, a multi-hour operation. And now that there's chaos and confusion, now that there's tank crewmen getting out of their burning tanks, now they're hit with another salvo of rockets and artillery into the spot, creating chaos for the fighters, for the soldiers that are outside of their vehicles or trying to decide which direction to go in their vehicles. In other words, you're watching a perfectly executed tank ambush in this village overnight. And the distance makes it so that you have to watch this battle from afar. But most of the viewers of this program watched the Resistance Report covering the Gaza war, and we know what close-up anti-tank operations look like. And so you know that these, from this distance, if you can see them, you know they're significant operations. This is the Israelis putting lights, illuminating flares up here. Then you can see another rocket strike on another vehicle of the support. This is the reinforcements that have now come in, and they're being targeted. That's an Israeli light trying to find out where the source of the fire is coming from. You can see it. And here, again, the rescue forces being targeted, something we did not see in Gaza, but we do see here in Lebanon, and we did see it before, causing significant issues for the Israelis when you fire on their attempts to. There's a helicopter coming in, and they're going to fire on the helicopter too. An air defense missile is fired at that incoming helicopter. Again, something we didn't see in Gaza, but that Hezbollah in this existential battle is clearly doing. And this is a few hours later in the morning, where the Israelis are covering the entire area with smoke to withdraw their destroyed tanks from the battle. Another reason why we don't see the destroyed tanks, although I do have one for you that the Israelis released, but you can see the smoke there. A really complex and well-executed ambush. And to see it on film is the only difference for this, because these types of ambushes are what are going on every night. And when you read Hezbollah's field reports from the day, you'll see the number of tanks that they target. And all of the tanks that are targeted are not destroyed. We know some have AP, active protection systems that protect them. We know sometimes the round hits a heavy part of the tank and doesn't destroy it. But we know many of them burn, and we know from the soldiers inside that the burning of the tanks is their biggest fear. And it's a fear that is not imaginary. It's because they have experienced it over the past 2.5, coming up on 3 years of war. Let's take a look at number 38, another anti-tank guided missile strike on another Israeli command and control position here that we're seeing in the Bint Jbeil area, just southwest of Bint Jbeil. And again, using these houses, this is something that the Israelis do in the West Bank. They did it in Gaza. They take over a civilian home, and they use that as a base, with the supposition that the resistance doesn't know which homes they're in. Clearly a mistake in this one, because they're going to be fired on pretty significantly by Hezbollah anti-tank missiles here. You can see a direct strike on the house. And one more, number 39, we're going to see 3 Cornet strikes here intercept another tank convoy. So here we're seeing, again, thermal imaging. You can see the one tank there moving. You're going to see them all clump up into 3, and they're going to be targeted by anti-tank guided missile strikes. We're trying to see it from there. You see the thermal of the Cornet being fired there and following its trajectory right directly into the tank that we're watching. That's circled in red, clearly hits the tank. And we're going to see another one. This is the first of 3 that were hit in this particular operation. So the tempo of these operations by Hezbollah are just really remarkable. 1,350 plus operations already, 24 days into this battle. There you see 2 more tanks along the same road. They're going to target the tank at the back and then the tank at the front. This is how the tank massacre in the Hula Valley happened in the 2006 war. Targeted the front of the convoy, targeted the back of the convoy, got everybody stuck in the middle, and then just fired on all the tanks in the middle. That's considered the graveyard of the Merkava that happened in not too far from this area that you're seeing here, just a bit further up north. More towards Merjayun battle space that we were seeing. So there again, and there's the third one being hit. And if we watch here, we're going to see a tank crewman fleeing on foot. And I'm sure if they could see other ones, there he is there. You can see him running away on foot. Hezbollah's helpfully put a little circle around him as he tries to find a better position than the tank that he was in that is burning. So significant operation there by Hezbollah. In the next slide, you can see the burning tank that was released by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿. We know that these tanks burn. We don't. We don't see much of it, but there's a pretty clear shot from the battle in Lebanon. And I want to just wrap on with Palestine. The 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 released a video this week in solidarity with the Axis of Resistance. Of course, this war started in Gaza, and the 𝐓𝐶 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 saluting the Yemeni people. Then here's Islamic Jihad founder Fathi Shaqaqi saying Palestine is the center of the struggle today and will remain so despite all the secret and black agreements. He's speaking about the secret Oslo Accords this is Ayatollah Khamenei. And he's saying the fate of the region depends on the liberation from the arrogant American hegemony and the liberation of Palestine. Here you're going to see Yahya Sinwar giving his famous speech from the platform on the anniversary of the Hamas, the founding of Hamas. He says, "We will not hesitate to make the decision," he said. And they certainly did not hesitate to make that decision. Abdul Malik al-Houthi from the Yemeni Armed Forces, he said, "Our stance continues." Then there was Ziad Nakala, who is the General Secretary of Islamic Jihad. Then the missile launches that we saw this week. And then Hassan Nasrallah is going to come in here and say the final result of this battle and the great divine historic victory that is Netanyahu, Gallant, Ben-Gvir, and Smotrich are leading their entity into an abyss. We see footage from on the ground in Gaza, some Saraya operations here, Qassam operation, and then missile strikes that we've shown you on this program as well. So that's Nasrallah now speaking, saying that the entity is leading into an abyss, which is sort of similar to what their chief of staff said when they said they're about to collapse. But yes, this is definitely the end of Israeli superiority. The idea that they could just roll through the Middle East and do what they want is being fiercely resisted by the Axis of Resistance on all fronts. So it's something that they always point out. When the battle was in Gaza, the other resistance factions saluted them. We see the prisoner exchange and handover here, and the Yemeni fighters here at the end. I think they've trained hundreds of thousands of them to fight this battle. The Yemeni armed forces are significantly larger, and here they are walking on Al-Aqsa. So solidarity video from 𝐓𝐶 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 to the resistance axis. And here we have the PFLP Abu Ali Mustafa brigades commenting on the new Israeli execution law. This poster that was put out yesterday says, "We are stronger than death and higher than the gallows," as the fist breaks the gallows, smashing the gallows. And Abu Ubaidah also spoke this week. He said, "Blessed are the hands of the heroes of the Islamic resistance in Lebanon, which are inflicting heavy losses on the Zionist enemy, the latest during a qualitative operation yesterday. We call on Hezbollah to intensify their efforts to capture soldiers in order to liberate Palestinian and Arab prisoners from the depths of the occupation's prisons, especially after the approval of the law to execute prisoners. We urge the heroes of Hezbollah to complete the mission," is what Abu Ubaidah said. So that is the resistance report for day 909 of Israel's genocide in Gaza and day 34 of the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran.
Wow. Thank you, John. War on all fronts. It's a lot.
And I think we can say that, what characterized war in the region for so many decades, all the time I was growing up, was this idea that Israel is invincible.
Yeah.
And you can see that they are, not for the first time, but on a scale we've never seen before, struggling on every front. They cannot, their qualitative edge, so-called, their superiority is gone with the rapid change of technology.
Mm-hmm. And the hubris that they still have, just like the Trump administration has, that they really feel like they can walk in and take whatever they want and lie about it, and and not be surprised that resistance still exists and is getting stronger and is matching and overwhelming their capabilities. It is quite something. And go ahead.
But at high cost, as John pointed out, as we always point out, that they go for the hospitals and the schools and the civilian neighborhoods because they cannot fight.
That's dirty.
Against, it is it's dirty, it's illegal, it's criminal, it's genocidal, it's everything.
Yeah. And then speaking of the, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say to John about the AWACS. While you were talking, I went on eBay to see if I could find an AWACS because they don't make them anymore.
No.
So it really doesn't matter how much money you're willing to pay for one if they don't make them.
No, they're not even making the replacements yet. They're not even making the new upgrades to the system. So those are many years in the future. Same with those early warning radars. They take years to make.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't find any on eBay, so I guess they're out of.
They've already scoured eBay.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, John, you were talking about the this execution law, this that the Israeli Knesset has just passed, and in the news report, I also quoted someone in Gaza saying that this is the prisoner issue is still the most significant issue, and we will stand with our prisoners. And of course, the prisoners issue, if people remember, was a defining factor in the operation of October 7th. It was to free the prisoners from Israel's torture camps and dungeons, and it was to enact a cost for the more than 16, 17 years of siege on Gaza. So what do you think the significance is of Israel escalating it's just a barbaric law of execution now, a de jure law, enacting, codifying a policy that's been already practiced for decades, and Palestinians taking note.
Well,
General, go ahead, Ali.
Go ahead, John. Well, we want to talk about that. Do we want to give people the basics first, and then we can come back and talk about it?
Sure, that's a good idea.
Let's do that, because I think this is such an important story. So if you're just joining us, you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm here with my colleagues Nora Barrows-Friedman and Jon Elmer. On March 30th, the Israeli Knesset passed a law imposing the death penalty by hanging on Palestinians convicted in its military kangaroo courts of killing Israelis. The law mandates executions within 90 days, sharply restricts appeals and clemency, and is designed to be applied only against Palestinians, not Israeli Jews. It passed by 62 to 48, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu voting in favor, and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir celebrating its passage. In one video that we'll take a look at, Ben-Gvir is seen popping champagne after the vote. Diab Abu-Jahjah, the director of the Hind Rajab Foundation, said that Israel has now become the first state to codify a death sentence that applies in practice to one ethnic group, while another is effectively shielded from it. This death penalty targets Palestinians under occupation in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, but also Palestinian citizens of Israel, particularly those in occupied East Jerusalem, according to the legal rights group Adalah. Adalah immediately petitioned Israel's Supreme Court, arguing that the law adopts an apartheid-like approach to the fundamental right to life. The Israeli human rights group B'Tselem said that the Israel Prison Service has already begun preparing designated facilities to start carrying out executions. According to B'Tselem, the death penalty will be the default sentence, and judges will be able to commute it to life imprisonment only in special circumstances. In addition, the judges will no longer be required to reach a unanimous decision. A simple majority will suffice, and once the sentence has been handed down, there will be no possibility of a pardon or any reduction of the sentence. Now, it's important to remember that they're talking about Israeli military courts that are used only against Palestinians and which have a 99.7% conviction rate. Palestinian journalists in Gaza have denounced the law as a declaration that Palestinian life is disposable, and in fact, across Palestine, it has been met with outrage, protests, and calls for resistance. The Palestinian Prisoners' Rights Group Ad-Damir called on the European Union to immediately suspend its association agreement with Israel. Article 2 of that agreement, which grants Israel many lucrative trade privileges, states that the entire agreement is contingent on Israel respecting human rights. But reaction from the so-called international community has been muted. The European Union issued what I can only call a shocking statement that failed to condemn the death penalty law. Instead, the EU said, quote, "We are deeply concerned about the de facto discriminatory nature of the bill." Even worse, the EU praised Israel's human rights record. It stated, quote, "Israel had long upheld a de facto moratorium on both executions and capital punishment sentencing, thereby leading by example in a region despite a complex security environment."
Yikes.
This depraved statement ignores the reality, well documented by the UN, Israeli, Palestinian, and international human rights groups, that Israeli personnel routinely and on a shocking scale torture, and that includes sexual torture, and murder Palestinians inside and outside Israeli prisons, crimes that have continued for decades and have only escalated. Some 100 Palestinians are known to have died in Israeli prisons since October 2023, with many unaccounted for. Last month, Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, published a report on Israel's use of torture in the context of genocide. It states, quote, that torture has become integral to the domination of and punishment inflicted on Palestinian men, women, and children, both through custodial abuse and through a relentless campaign of forced displacement, mass killings, deprivation, and destruction of all means of life to inflict long-term collective pain and suffering. Referring to the death penalty law in recent days, Albanese said, "After the right to torture Palestinians, apartheid Israel claims the right to hang Palestinians. The shame of the century continues. Ben-Gvir belongs in The Hague." Now, what the muted and passive European reaction tells us, I think, is that these allegedly human rights loving states are not actually bothered by the death penalty law, because they've never been bothered by Israel's ongoing extrajudicial executions of Palestinians. They are only embarrassed that Israel is formalizing its policy of state murder and making it harder for them to ignore Israel's crimes and pretend that it's a democracy.
Yeah. John, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways to go, right? Like, Israel is the number one assassinator of peoples in the world. The Second Intifada was essentially an assassination game for the Israelis. They assassinated more than 500 people just in that single battle alone. So they already do it. It's, but this is a way that they believe will disincentivize the capture of Israeli soldiers, because they won't have anyone to free, because they'll all be executed. So really, this is kind of like a tantrum against the defeat of October 7th and not being able to get back their their captives, and they know now that they're not getting back their captives anytime, because we now have a genocide failed to do it. In the previous example with 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿 in 2006, he was there for 5 years without the Israelis never had a clue where he was. So I think, you need to look at those antecedents, but also just that this government is nuts. It's like they're just happy murderers, and they're like, ethnic supremacists. So they're going to put on the books a law where that's executions for particular nationality only, particular race of people. It's just this country is dying. There's no way you hold up a country like this. The way that Israel used to take care of their soldiers was something that the Palestinian resistance used to say was honorable, that they would always bring home their soldiers, that it was a top priority. And if they ever didn't do that, that would be a benefit to the resistance for them to go down this road, because who wants to fight in an army that you're gonna, you get captured, you get Hannibaled, and everyone says good. If you do manage to make it back in time, or make it back alive, all of the people in your society attack you like they did the released captives from Gaza. They attack you. So there's just a lot of signs here that point to, a state that has hit a point of no return in its, what Nasrallah said, falling into its abyss.
Yeah.
But it's also a measure of how confident Israel is of total impunity.
Yeah.
The reaction has been muted. Remember, all these countries that parroted the fake numbers of Iran killing tens of thousands of its own people in January, numbers that have no evidence behind them, no basis, that are not credible. And remember Trump saying that he was going to, at that point, of course, it was an excuse, but a lot of people went along with it, that he was going to go to war against Iran to stop one person being hanged. And the European Union will not even, its whole trade agreement is predicated on Israel's respect for human rights. I mean, a whole genocide didn't get them to suspend it. People will remember, who are regular viewers, that we went back, I guess it was almost a year ago, in the months before the so-called ceasefire, the European Union kept having meetings, and they're like, we're going to pass a sanction against Israel. We're really going to do it. Our next meeting, don't test us. We're meeting again 3 months' time, and we're really going to pass sanctions this time. You remember that, right? Well, they didn't in the end, not a single sanction. And of course, the excuse was, well, most of us wanted to do something, but, Germany wouldn't let us, or, I don't know who else wouldn't let us. But after the so-called ceasefire, they all rushed to sign new agreements with Israel. Germany, of course, signed an unprecedented agreement between the German military and Israel as for close military cooperation with this army while it's conducting a genocide. The European Union ambassador, of course, our colleague David Cronin, who covers this so well, was going around, this is in the last few weeks and months, going around to chambers of commerce and visiting military-linked companies in Israel in order to drum up business. They're so greedy. There's like nothing can stop them from, looking for an extra euro. I mean, it's a big world. Is Israel the only place where you can greedily make your euros? Like, not even a genocide will stop you. And so the Israelis know this, and so they're like, sure, we can string them up in our torture and rape camps, and the Europeans will still come begging us for business, throwing contracts at us. They love us, and it's completely true. The Israelis are not wrong about that.
No. I mean, obviously there are already legal challenges to this law. You mentioned Adela has just petitioned, whatever the farce of the Israeli High Court is. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like what
the
would
High
stop
Court,
this?
the so-called
They don't need a
Supreme,
law to keep, executing people.
The so-called Supreme Court in Israel has put its blessing on every one of Israel's crimes since it was founded, on torture, on home demolitions, on just you name it, on all the horrific things they do. But the Supreme Court also serves a propaganda function of trying to make Israel look like a liberal democracy.
Normal state.
Yeah. So we don't know, because like we get liberal justices in the United States, like Eleanor Kagan, and I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg too said this, like, oh, they love the Israeli Supreme Court. It's their, these are icons. You see Ruth Bader Ginsburg stickers on like liberal bumpers with, the
throw pillows.
Sorry?
Throw pillows on their couches.
Right. So all of that. So, this liberal washing of the Israeli Supreme Court. But historically, its function has been to bless Israel's crimes like torture, but to say, oh, we're going to put it in a legal framework. If you're going to torture someone, you have to, do this, and this to protect them. I mean, just like Orwellian stuff. So I won't be surprised if the Israeli Supreme Court pushes back for international consumption in some way, but it will be it will only be damage limitation. What they'll eventually, they might curtail some of the more extreme aspects of this, like no appeal, for example. But that will be to serve to legitimize the law.
Yeah, and what's stopping Itamar Ben-Gvir from doing any of the things that he's already doing? I mean, he's overseeing systematic torture and rape of Palestinian prisoners in these camps.
He brags about it. He goes around the prisons with a camera crew.
Right, because he knows that the Israeli public, the vast majority of it, is very supportive. Don't be surprised.
What they've said or what we've heard so far is that these executions, these horrific crimes are going to be committed behind closed doors with no one present. Don't be surprised if they start publishing videos, because they delight and revel in their crimes. They enjoy them. This is their greatest source of pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same society that takes lawn chairs and snacks to watch the decimation of people
and that does TikTok impersonations of starving Palestinians in order
parading
to mock
around
them.
in women's
There's
underwear.
no reason to think they would not enjoy this and do it publicly.
Yeah. It's sick. Well, on that note.
On that note, can I do one more very short thing?
Please.
I don't think any program would be complete without condemning Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations.
There's always time and space to condemn him.
Very quickly, because he gave a speech today, or a statement. I did listen to it earlier in the day. It was a few hours ago. But there's a tweet from his account. Tamara, if you could be so good as to put it up. We don't need to listen to the video. The words are enough. I put it in the text, and what it says. Let me see if I can find it for myself here. Oops. Oh no, I didn't put it. I'm sorry, Tamara. That's me not hitting send. Okay, I sent it now. My apologies for that. And what Antonio Guterres says is, my message is clear to the USA and Israel. It's high time to stop the war that is inflicting immense human suffering and triggering devastating economic consequences. To Iran, stop attacking your neighbors. So listen to that language. To the USA and Israel, stop the war. To Iran, stop attacking your neighbors. It is just shameful. and reprehensible beyond belief that the Secretary General of the United Nations, who's supposed to be neutral, who's supposed to apply the UN Charter, is going along with this Israeli-American message that Iran is the aggressor, when Iran was the victim of the highest crime in the UN Charter, which is war of aggression. It is absolutely reprehensible and disgusting. And it is just like, I don't know, people say the UN is finished, the UN is over. That may well be the case, but certainly if there's any hope for any kind of international system, it doesn't exist while people like this are in office.
Yeah. We should have like a weekly condemnation segment. Who can we condemn this week?
Well, we would need another 3 hours just for the condemnation section. Follow me on Twitter, you'll get it there.
All the condemnations fit to give. Thanks, Ali. All right, let's take a look at the website. We have an incredible collection of features once again, and of course, analysis and news by our own staff members. You mentioned David Cronin's recent piece about the European Union.
And he has this new piece published yesterday, which is exactly what I talked about. The headline there, bemoaning death penalty, EU bankrolls merchants of death. And this is about EU funding for a weapons company called Leonardo that is involved in Israeli crimes. So just the sheer hypocrisy of the EU. But they try to thrive under cover of just people not noticing. That's why we're so happy to have David Cronin exposing these things.
He notices everything. Yes.
He really does. He goes after them. Again, you read from the, if we're back on the front page, you read from the piece by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 and 𝐓𝐡𝐞. I talked about this last week. It's a remarkable piece. If you haven't read it, please do. It's just really extraordinary journalism. We're so proud of this journalism, and it's incredible, the work that went into it, and just the stories of people in Gaza. I mean, I just couldn't believe some of the things people are dealing with, and it's our duty to make this visible and tell the world about it. So this is really a story that you should be sharing with friends and relatives and people you know on your lists. It's just very important journalism. And then another piece, I mean, this week, it's been a busy week. Really, it's been extraordinary.
You had 2 incredible standalone interviews for the podcast.
Was that all in the last week?
Just in the last like 5 days,
Was it? So there was the most recent one, Nadine Kiswani. She is the founder of Within Our Lifetime. She is a very prominent, very incredible Palestinian American activist. And for those who haven't heard, I know many people have, but this is pretty shocking. The FBI and the police in New York uncovered a plot to murder her allegedly by a member of an offshoot of the Jewish Defense League who was planning to firebomb her house. He'd made very elaborate plans to do so, and he was then planning to flee to Israel. And he was caught as he was, just about to implement this detailed plan. And we spoke. Nadine Kiswani gave her first interview to us at the Electronic Intifada, and she's just incredible. I mean, she is so courageous. She has faced so much hatred and incitement by top, I don't mean top in a good way, I mean prominent politicians in the United States, the lowest of the low,
the worst
actually,
of the worst. Randy Fine is obsessed with her.
Inciting against her, denigrating her. And one thing she said to me that really stuck with me, she mentioned how, she has a 10-month-old son. And she said, when I look at him, I think of Ali Dawabsheh. He was the little Palestinian child who 10 years ago was burned to death when settlers firebombed his family's home in the West Bank. And she said, I know that that's what they want to do to us.
Yeah.
So, but the key message, that one of the key messages Nadine put out there, and that's why I really hope people listen to this, is she said, I'm not going to be silenced. This is all to try to silence us. So just all our love and solidarity to Nadine, and I continue personally to be inspired by her courage.
Yeah. She's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And then you had another interview.
This was such an interesting conversation with 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜. She is an international legal scholar. She's a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Tehran. Now, last year, she was expelled from Yale University Law School for speaking out about Palestine solidarity. And when you listen to her, you'll understand why Yale did not want her there, because she is so smart, so
smarter
critical.
than all the professors there. Yeah.
So and that's not what they want at American universities these days. They don't want people asking questions and articulating ideas that challenge power in the way she does. And she was speaking to us from Tehran, and she does reporting herself. I mean, she's not a reporter, but she started to go out and just interview people and post videos. And we actually see in this interview, we play a clip of her talking to children in Tehran, which is very moving. But she gives a really interesting analysis at every level of what's happening within Iran and geopolitically, and also how Iran views the way it's waging this war of self-defense from a legal perspective. I learned so much from 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜. So check that out. You'll find the article with the video on the website, or of course on our YouTube channel.
It's fantastic. Thanks, Ali. And of course, to keep all of this running smoothly and courageously, hi, Jon. We are always grateful for your support. If you go to the top of the website and hit the Donate Now link, it will take you to a way that you can support either with a one-time donation or a monthly sustainer, fund, gift, whatever it's called. And Ali, who are the people that we have to thank this week?
All of you. You're all incredible who are watching, listening, commenting, liking, giving us thumbs up, sending us emails, which we read. We don't always answer them quickly, but we read them, and I try to answer them. Some of you know I do answer them, and some of you are still waiting, but I'll try to get to you. But we really love you because you give us the strength, you give us the encouragement, and we know that you're out there still talking about Palestine, talking about Gaza. The past few weeks we've been talking about Iran because it's all linked, it's all connected, and that's one of the key points that 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 made. She really showed how what's happening with Iran is deeply connected to the struggle for liberation in Palestine. So we try to cover it all, and you are the ones who make it happen. So thank you to everyone who has already hit that Donate Now button on the website, and there are links in the description on the YouTube video. And I'm just going to mention a few names. This is some people who have made a one-time donation, which we always appreciate, and some who are giving a monthly gift, which can be a few dollars a month, or it can be as much as you like. The point is, everyone's contribution really helps make this happen, and we only want your contribution if you can afford it. Because that way you're giving this gift of information and knowledge to everyone. So thank you, Azhar, Salman, Anthony, Ivor, Rolf, Michael, Tariq, Detlef, Antoinette, Mats, Jeffrey, Cheryl, Dimitri, and Jonathan. Thank you to each and every one of you, and to everyone whose name I didn't read. We love you and we appreciate you.
We do indeed. Thank you. Okay, well, I want to, of course, thank our producer and director, Tamara. I think John had about 150 videos this episode, and so that was a lot for her to juggle. Thank you, Tamara, for everything you do. Thank you to Ali Gerzon for social media production. Thank you to Pierre Loisel for radio. Thanks to everyone at the Electronic Intifada, all of our colleagues. And on behalf of myself, Ali, John, and Tamara, thank you all. And we will see you, inshallah, next week.